right, welcome back to Wrestling Retold and Relived with Richie Mars. I, of course, am your gracious host, Richie Mars, and with me today is a very special guest. He is a veteran of the podcast scene. He's done this for quite a bit. You might know him as Scott from Shoot the Flick, but I know him as one of my dear best friends, Scott Eisenberg from Shoot the Flick. Scott, great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Honestly, yeah, now that you said it, I've been podcasting for a long time.
Yeah, about like 3 or 4 years, or has it been longer?
Shoot the Flick has been, we're about to finish our third year with Shoot the Flick. And before that,
Oh,
I did other shows. So I've been podcasting for like 6 or 7 years, give or take.
that is insane.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us on the show here today. And today's topic is a very special topic because a lot of people call it the apex of pro wrestling before mainstream interest declined. That is Rock Austin 2. When I toyed with this idea of going back and reliving all these past feuds or topics, I asked you which one would you be most interested in doing, and you picked Rock and Austin. Why is that?
Okay, first off, this is arguably one of the biggest feuds of all time, given at the time two of the biggest baby faces in wrestling, maybe two of the biggest baby faces in wrestling, period. I'm a huge Rock fan. I've always been a gigantic Rock fan. And Austin he's up there for me too, but it's just crazy to think at the time you had these two, as even The Rock said during the feud, two unstoppable forces meeting on the biggest stage to fight, and neither of them were going to give an inch.
I wasn't watching during this time. I was a little bit too young. I think it was like 5 or 6 when Rock Austin 2 happened. When did your fandom start, and was this like a big part of that?
I actually started as a WCW person.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was a WCW fan before I was ever watched WWF, WWE. I was a huge fan of Kevin Nash. I came up right as the NWO became gigantic. Like it was it was almost unavoidable when you were that young. Then as time started going on and I started watching WWF, I quickly gravitated to The Rock because he is one of the biggest characters that has ever existed. He was the most electrifying man in sports entertainment. I actually remember watching live. WCW said Mankind was going to win the WWF title. And I remember switching over because they thought, oh, we're going to spoil what WWF is going to do. And everyone turned to watch Mankind win the WWF title. It was the biggest miscalculation.
So do you think that was the point where you switched from a WCW fan to a WWF WWE fan, or do you think that happened later down the line?
I think that's kind of close to where the switch kind of happened. Like I followed WWF, but I wasn't like crazy big into it yet. But that was like the big like, oh, I'll switch over, and then I started getting into more of that stuff, like more of WWF storylines and stuff where Austin gets run over. I watched that tape a lot.
The story really does begin to the return of Stone Cold Steve Austin. He wins the Royal Rumble.
Yes, his third time.
His third time, never been done before or since.
Probably I was gonna say probably won't be done again, but it probably will be done again. I assume by Roman.
Possibly. The next month at No Way Out, The Rock beats Kurt Angle for the WWE WWF title in a very good match. And now we're on a collision course to WrestleMania 17, Rock versus Austin.
You don't do this very often in wrestling. You don't have two of the top baby faces fight each other, just like you don't have two of your top heels fight each other. It's something that doesn't get done frequently. Because it's like it's so much easier to have a heel face dynamic and build it that way than to have two faces fight each other. So you have to give a reason for these guys to fight each other, and like, yes, the WWF heavyweight title is the big reason, but you have to give them more than that.
I'll also go one step further. I don't think any company in the wrestling industry has been at a point where you had two baby faces that are legitimately at like the same level, if not 1A, 1B. I don't think wrestling has been the same again, where two guys break out into almost mainstream popularity during this time, and their popularities were pretty much dead even, if not very close to.
Well, another big thing about this is, like, the reason the Attitude Era gets so much love, and we've had this argument before off air constantly. I think the talent today is greater than the Attitude Era's talent.
I agree.
But the Attitude Era gets so much more love because at any given time, just even watching this feud, you had The Rock, Austin, Taker, Kane, Triple H, Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho. As much as I don't like bringing up his name, Chris Benoit was in there. You had all these guys who, at any given point, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some, could have been world heavyweight champion realistically.
The talent pool of main event stars where you could like plug in and plug out at a moment's notice and it wouldn't feel weird or forced. Everybody was a viable contender at any time. There wasn't anybody who felt kind of out of place. The Rock and Austin, as far as I know, never had backstage quote unquote heat with each other. They never disagreed. It was more professional competition where it's like, I'm the top guy. No, I'm the top guy. And now you have these two colliding together to see who is in fact the top person in this industry, and both of them have at that point terrific claims to that top spot.
Well, yeah, of course, both of them have huge claims. I think they've said it in interviews separately at different times, talking about each other. Is Rock, because he has such a pedigree with his family,
Hmm.
he had Austin kind of at somewhere in his mind resented Rock's pedigree and Rock's claim to, and he, as I think he put it at the time, an easier route to the top.
The Rock has always been positioned as the handpicked guy, but with The Rock it took him a little bit, just like Roman, ironically enough, to find his footing, to find his groove, to find The Rock, not just be that legacy character. He had to come into his own, show off his own personality. And with Stone Cold, that personality kind of bottled up from false starts, false breaks in WCW, even WWE when he first came over as the ringmaster. And it was very like a blue collar way in a lot of aspects of getting to that top spot. While The Rock was handpicked, and then he got it taken away from him, and then he had to scratch and claw to prove that he deserved that spot that they picked him in.
Yeah, honestly, The Rock closely resembles Orton's rise too, because Orton has kind of some of the same thing of being just a smug little heel who was handpicked. It wasn't until he found the Viper persona that he became the superstar that he became. So The Rock, when he got his way into the Nation of Domination, found The Rock.
And that's why I love this story of Rock Austin, because each guy's claim to be the top guy is believable. Because with The Rock, it's in his blood to be the top guy, to be the WWE champion. For Stone Cold, he was the guy on top of the mountain. He was the Bruno Sammartino. He was the Hulk Hogan. He was the Ric Flair of the quote unquote territory or WWE during that time. He went away and now he wants it back.
The only minor note I have for this feud overall, it's only a little note, is because they introduced it so late into the feud, Austin never says until 3 days before WrestleMania, when he's in the interview with JR and The Rock, I will do anything to get that title. I want it, and I like it. It is everything to me. he hints at it a couple times, but when he finally says it, I'm like, I only wish that was said 2 weeks ago.
Let's kick it off right now. Now this build to this feud is 5 weeks, 10 episodes, 5 Raw, 5 SmackDown. It's February 26th, night after No Way Out. Rock beat Kurt Angle. Very good match. I always liked the chemistry between those two.
Kurt's underrated. Kurt has great chemistry with almost anybody he's ever wrestled. I've never really seen him have bad chemistry. He's had chemistry with certain people, but he's usually pretty good with most people.
He's in the rare category with Shawn Michaels, AJ Styles, and I'm gonna put Christian Cage in there too because I think Christian Cage is phenomenal and phenomenally underrated.
I think
That
Christian has gotten better as time has gone on.
I just think all of them have great psychology in wrestling, but this is when Kurt was still finding his groove and he was picking it up very naturally too. Rock comes out and he praises Kurt Angle's ability, but then immediately calls him a virgin because that's what Rock did back then.
Well, that's what all the baby faces did. You look at all of them. Anytime you were a good talker, and you could build somebody up and then tear them down immediately. Like Rock did it constantly. Jericho was great at carrying people down.
Yeah. And the
Uh,
thing is, they were very generous with their losses too, because they can make fun of you all day long and they would still get beat up.
oh yeah, and that's the other thing. Like you believe when The Rock gets his ass kicked, you believe it because he sells it real.
Rock's cutting the promo on Kurt Angle, transitions to Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Austin walks out and tells Rock to stay healthy, and The Rock tells him to get ready. Now, as a fan, were you hyped for this match, and were you still on The Rock side? Were you on Stone Cold's side?
Oh, I was always on Rock's side. But yeah, you can just feel it. Even rewatching it, you can still feel like the energy. The audience is going nuts. The audience has no idea who to pick. Like you want this match so bad. You almost don't want to wait till WrestleMania. You want it right now.
For the main event tonight, and I was really scratching my head because they show a video package at the beginning of the show of Rock Austin, and Big Show interferes. And it leads to this main event match. It's The Rock versus Kurt Angle versus Big Show for Big Show's Hardcore Championship. Now I wasn't watching wrestling at this point, and I've always heard about the hardcore shenanigans of the Attitude Era, but w- what was did you think it was a good idea to have the Hardcore Championship on the line here? It just seems like a pretty weird situation to kind of put it in because both Angle and Rock haven't really vowed for the hardcore title, but it's a way to kind of blow off like what happened the night
It
before.
is. It's a little way to blow off. It's a weird thing because the hardcore title, as much as it was a fun title and you had insanity happen constantly with it, hell, it was hysterical because when they announce, like, when they go backstage, because Big Show pretty much leaves the match at some point because the 24/7 rule was insane.
Sorry, we have interference from Billy Gunn, Albert, Perry Saturn, Hardcore Holly, S.A. Rios, and
S.A. Rios, hearing that name again was. God, I haven't heard that name in ages.
this is the famous spot where Big Show picks S.A. Rios up, plasters him backstage on a wall, and his shoulders are down, so the referee counts the pin on the wall, so Big Show retains the Hardcore Championship. But as it ends, all the heels are just on the Rock and just beating down on the Rock until Austin makes the save, making good on his promise that the Rock should stay healthy for their match at WrestleMania 17.
It is really good because then you have like a little bit of a stare down as Austin walks away and Rock stares him down. The interesting way to build it because it's like, oh, is it going to be just Austin wants his best? Because I think next week The Rock literally throws Angle back into ring to continue a fight with Austin next week.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that on this SmackDown. We have Kurt Angle in the ring. He says he promises The Rock or Austin will be carried out in stretchers after breaking their ankles tonight. This is the beginning of the Kurt Angle shift. He's less goofy here. He's going to be goofy later on the year, but he's less goofy here. And now this is his serious side. He just wants to break ankles after losing the WWF Championship. And now Austin says he wants to whoop Angle's ass. Rock comes out, builds WrestleMania with Austin, and he doesn't want Austin's help. He doesn't need his help, referring to the Raw before when Austin saved him, because no one wants to be saved by your enemy. Vince McMahon comes out with Regal, and he makes Rock versus Regal for the WWF Championship and Austin versus Angle tonight. When you have a match that's scheduled in the middle of the show for the WWF Championship or the WWE Championship, is it kind of a waste of a not a waste of a match, but just like a waste of a stipulation because we all know that Regal isn't going to win. Is it just kind of something that so the crowd can say, "Oh, we saw a WWE title match"?
Well, yeah, it is. It is a bit that like we saw a WWE title match. We all know Regal wasn't gonna win because Regal's not that. Unfortunately, Regal was never that caliber wrestler. He was never like top guy of a company wrestler. He
Yeah, he wasn't in that position.
No, he was the commissioner. Hell, I I laughed when the Rock brought up that he drank pee. It's such a dumb thing. I think McMahon even mentions like he wants this to be the biggest WrestleMania ever. He doesn't want anything to happen between these two, so he wants to keep them kind of separated. And that's why he's like, I'm gonna keep you in different matches and stuff. But I'm like, but you constantly put them in matches like where Kurt clearly is furious that he's not the WWE champion anymore. And Kurt is out to like prove because if Kurt beats Austin or The Rock at any given point during this feud, he would have a serious call to be put into that match.
I think it really speaks to the Attitude Era storytelling around this time where you could have many different moving parts of a single feud, but it still feels like it's still focused on the two guys. Rock versus Regal. Rock wins by DQ when Kurt Angle interferes. And now we're at Kurt Angle, Steve Austin. Rock comes out in commentary. Regal comes out to interfere, and The Rock kind of makes the saves. And there's a little tease at the end. So Austin stuns Regal. The Rock teases the Rock Bottom, Steve Austin, and they just stare at each other to close the show.
Yeah, I think it's Heyman who says on commentary where he goes, Rock could have just dropped him right there. It is a fun way to play with these two because they do it very well, the two of them playing off each other. And it is a nice little like tease because this is something that I think current WWE has a problem with. At least they did more recently. Is they as much as you have your two guys who are in this feud have to fight constantly. They have to always be touching each other. Rock and Austin, we are what? This is week 2 now?
We're still in the first week.
We're still in the first week. They haven't touched each other yet, really.
Nope, it was just this tease at the end of it.
Like they've talked, they've teased it, but they haven't. No one's thrown a punch at each other yet. No one's rock bottom. No one's stunned. We are building this tension. They haven't fought in a tag match. They haven't fought like in a singles match. We are just building the tension of these two, and it's a nice slow build so far.
Kickoff of the second week, and Triple H calls out Steve Austin saying we still have unfinished business from No Way Out. Austin comes out. Kurt Angle comes out because he's still sore about SmackDown. The Rock comes out for the save, and a match is made later that night. Triple H and Kurt Angle against The Rock and Steve Austin in the main event. Now, when you think of high caliber stars of the Attitude Era, these four come to mind immediately.
Yeah, again, other than Undertaker, there aren't 4 bigger stars at the time. Like Taker is the only guy you sub into this match that could take one of them out realistically as a top 4 guy. And even then, you could make the argument that one of them is still better than Taker.
If you were to say who's your Mount Rushmore of the Attitude Era, you would have a solid argument for any combination of 8 to 10 names of that time.
Yeah.
And there's a little wrinkle in the Austin Rock feud when Deborah goes to Vince McMahon saying she liked being the assistant commissioner, but now she wants to go back to managing. And Vince is like, Well, all right. Well, I'll give you a person to manage. So he announces before the match that Deborah, as of right now, will be managing The Rock. And Deborah is Stone Cold Steve Austin's wife at the time. Just another stoke to the flame of this feud.
Oh, well, yeah, because this is partially playing off of the McMahon Austin feud that lasted for years, it seems like.
When Steve Austin is making his entrance, he just grabs Vince by the collar, and you just hear Vince go, ah! And then that's when the match kicks off, and the match ends with Steve Austin hitting a stunner on Angle, but Deborah gets up on the apron, and Steve's like, "What are you doing? Get down from there!" And as he's doing that, the ref turns around, and The Rock's on top of Angle for the pin, and now Deborah is celebrating her client, The Rock, with the win, and Steve Austin is bewildered right now from what has transpired. Now, this is where we get to the Deborah arc of the storyline. How did you feel about Deborah's involvement? Did you think it was necessary? And if so, why or why not?
Yes and no. Is it necessary? No, it's not really necessary. Like, they could have just kept going where they were going and it would have worked. But it does add a little bit to, again, the argument of two baby faces have to have a reason to really fight each other. Like, the title is, again, at WrestleMania, that's what's important. But for them to fight right now, this gives them a reason to fight on Raws and SmackDowns.
It's going to boil over into Austin warning The Rock to make sure nobody lays a hand on Deborah or it's his ass. And we're going to find out if The Rock can hold up that end of the bargain. So we fast forward to SmackDown, where Deborah goes to Vince and saying, Why'd you put me with Rock? And Vince is, he's sincere, but he's very insincere in this moment where he's like, well, Deborah, I see you as a high quality manager. And what better person to manage the WWE champion than you? Vince is very much toying with him. And Steve Austin says, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Vince has always looked to screw me, and this is his next thing to put me in an awkward position with Deborah managing my opponent for WrestleMania. It's also kind of a tease where you could kind of see Vince and Steve play up their rivalry here.
Of course.
And of course, what happens after the match at WrestleMania, we could ask questions. Well, was she planted there by both of them? It asks a lot of interesting questions that unfortunately weren't very much followed up on. But when we get to the match, it's The Rock versus Rikishi and Haku in a handicap match. And The Rock wins with a rock bottom, but Rikishi and Haku attack him after the match, and Deborah tries to stop him. But then Haku traps Deborah's arms, and now she's in the corner post and might get the dreaded stink face Rikishi was saying. I'm just going to back that ass up on Deborah and just hit her with the stink face. But as she's in position, I was amazed how fast Austin was running to prevent this because the glass breaks and he's already halfway down the ramp to stop it. And he's just brawling. He's stunning everybody. And he goes to leave. And then he realizes Deborah stayed with The Rock because contractually, she's The Rock's manager. So she has to stay behind.
Well, yeah, it does add a little interesting dynamic to the two of them. This whole match does play a little bit off of, as much as how stupid it became, I did it for The Rock. Rikishi, he was such a fun, goofy, loving character. The fact that they tried to make him like the bad heel still baffles me to this day.
Well, that's why they switched it over to Triple H after the fact because they knew it wasn't really working. It's kind of like a plot twist where it's like, all right, the main character is made out of broccoli. Doesn't make sense. Like I didn't expect it, but doesn't mean I like the
It
twist.
just makes no sense.
Anyway, we're at the end of week 2. We're almost halfway through the build. How are we feeling so far with this match? Are you getting excited? Are some things a little bit more tedious?
Again, it's a little like, I do like that we haven't like repeated a match yet. That is one thing that I think is really good. Like, so 2 weeks in, we haven't seen a match that we have seen before. Like, it is like, okay, we clearly are doing different matches, so it works out well. Is it a little tedious of the build? A little bit, but not too bad yet. It's not too. It's not so tedious where you're like, this is taking me out of it. But you're like, I just want it. I want this to explode already.
Well, we're finally gonna get some explosion at this week's Raw, where we're gonna have Kurt Angle getting his rematch for the WWE Championship against The Rock. Kurt Angle said in an interview, if Deborah enters, he's gonna take matters in his own hands, and he makes the stick breaking motion with his hands, implying that he will break her ankle. Of course, Steve Austin is not very pleased with that, confronts Angle, and it's like, whoa, whoa, I'm not gonna do anything. Spoiler alert, he's probably gonna do something. Austin then goes to Rock saying, hey, if he lays a hand on Deborah, it's your ass. So let's fast forward to the
And
match.
well, I do love because The Rock does go constantly. He goes, understand this. I didn't ask for Deborah. I didn't ask for her to be my manager. I didn't ask for anything with this. She's not my responsibility. She's your wife. Like, don't ask me to like if I'm getting my ass kicked and then suddenly Deborah steps in, don't ask me to save her. That's not my job.
What I find interesting in the build so far is that, again, there's no clear cut good guy, bad guy here. It's just them reacting to situations that are happening around them. Like, for instance, in the main event, Angle gets disqualified by keeping The Rock in the ankle lock for too long, and Deborah comes in pleading with Angle, please, please get off him, get off him. And then Angle teases doing the ankle lock to Deborah. Austin runs in, he beats up Angle, and then he tells Deborah to move out of the way, and boom, stunner. Stone Cold Steve Austin fired the first shot. He stuns The Rock, and he warned him ahead of time. If anything happens to Deborah, it's on you. Now, when you're seeing this on TV, that Steve Austin was the first one to fire the shot, did you think that was the appropriate time to do it?
I think yes. I think this is the right time to do it. Again, this is week 3. This is the time where we have to start seeing things, or else the audience may get stagnant on the feud.
And do you think it was the right idea or the right decision for Steve Austin to strike first?
Yes, it is the right idea for Austin to strike first because as much as Austin is a baby face, actually The Rock is kind of in the same boat. They are both kind of what we would call tweeners now, but Austin is much more volatile than The Rock is at this point.
And we're going to kick it on over to SmackDown, and Steve Austin has an interview with good old JR. And he's saying it's the culmination to his journey ever since being taken out by that Jurassic car driven by Rikishi. And he's looking forward to go to WrestleMania and become WWE champion, and says Vince is still on him because he's paired up Deborah with The Rock, and he's still blaming Vince for some of the, not the shortcomings, but what's going on in the World Wrestling Federation as a whole in his career. And he is hyped up so much, in fact, for this no disqualification match for Austin and Angle. And The Rock comes down in the ring, and he's walking very slowly, and he's taking his time. And Steve Austin is down the ring, and Rock throws Angle in the ring. And they're asking Rock, why are you doing that? And Rock's like, oh, The Rock just wants to make sure this match continues fairly. And then The Rock finally can't stand it anymore, and he wants his revenge now. He knows he got stunnered on Raw. He wants to rock bottom Austin. He goes for the rock bottom on Austin. Angle interrupts. So now Angle and Rock are brawling for a bit. And then The Rock bottoms Angle. And then he turns around and wham! One more stunner. Another stunner. So then Rock is out, and Austin covers Angle, gets the 1, 2, 3, and Austin celebrates at the end of the show. Now that's 2 shows in a row that Austin stands tall. When you're seeing this as a Rock fan, how were you feeling at this time? Were you just being like, oh, why does The Rock keep getting in these situations? Or did you think, were you thinking, The Rock's going to get his revenge eventually?
Well, at the time, I thought, okay, The Rock's going to get his revenge. At the time when I was younger watching it, going, yeah, The Rock's going to get, eventually get his. But even rewatching it now, I was almost a little scared because I don't remember this everything perfectly. It's been years since I've watched the build up to the feud. I've watched the match a bunch of times, but the build up I haven't watched. And I'm like, do they build The Rock to like be a weak looking champion? Like, is that gonna be a thing here? Is like Austin always gonna get like the upper hand? Like, I don't remember that being the case.
Especially around this time, or for the majority of Steve Austin's time, very rarely was he ever looked as weak in a build. It would be like if he was weak one week, then he would get revenge 10 times over the next week. And it's kind of like the Bugs Bunny effect, where you think, oh, we got Bugs right where we want him, and then all of a sudden Bugs like drops a giant ton weight on your head. It's kind of like that effect, like the Roadrunner effect,
Yeah,
Bugs Bunny effect.
it is. It definitely is. It is. I think having Austin keep this upper hand early does add a little bit to as we get forward, as The Rock does play this game a little more effectively. It's just nice to see that they built this so well. They really did build this really well, because now we've had a couple of instances of explosion, but not the big one yet.
It's like we're gonna get to that explosion, and we're gonna get it to it right now because next night on Raw, this is the start of week 4. And now we have The Rock waiting for Steve Austin's plane because Steve Austin is having flight troubles. And The Rock comes out to the ring. He's like, Steve Austin doesn't have plane troubles. He has rock troubles. And then he goes to the back and he has to prepare for his handicap match. It's champions versus maybe challengers. I don't know. It's The Rock and Chris Jericho against the formidable team of William Regal, Chris Benoit, and Kurt Angle. And the end of that match is pure chaos. The Regal pins Jericho, which sets up their match at WrestleMania.
Okay.
Let me back up a little bit. So Coach is at the airport and he's interviewing Austin. Stone Cold, The Rock just
He's waiting for you,
yeah,
basically.
the coach is just saying he's waiting for you. He's like, is he now? And it's like, oh, thank you very much. The Rock, Steve Austin is now. Stone Cold's gonna just go over there and whip The Rock's ass. By the way, give me my bags too while you're at it.
Coach.
Match is over, pure chaos. Steve Austin's music hits, and he's hitting everybody inside. And he wants to go for another stunner on The Rock because, again, Rock called him out. So the logical thing is you want a stunner in him again. But Kurt Angle interferes, and then Steve Austin takes care of Angle. But as he's turning around, The Rock, boom, hits Steve Austin with the WWE title. And now Chris Benoit's on The Rock. Rock tosses out Chris Benoit. They're both, and I thought this was like a great shot, a great planned shot. Now they're both like woozy, they're both a little wobbly. They hit back to back. They turn around, and The Rock is just a split second faster and hits the rock bottom on Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh yeah, it is a great way to get The Rock back his heat. It's this whole chaos, as much as that's the way it's described. You described it earlier, because it is chaos. It's just great to see when Rock just drops him, and you're like, yes, here we go.
There's so much going on. Like you have The Rock hitting Austin with a title belt, then you have Benoit coming in on The Rock, and The Rock finally overcoming Benoit, and them both staggering to their feet, and then they hit back to back, and they both turn around, seeing who's there, and The Rock just instinct rock bottoms Steve Austin, and that's how we end the show, and that's how we're gonna get to SmackDown too. This is probably my favorite part of the build. I'm not gonna lie. It is Jim Ross interviewing both The Rock and Steve Austin. And it's them just talking and discussing pretty much what we talked about so far. Deborah being involved, why the match at WrestleMania is the most important for him. With Rock, it's all about legacy and proving that he's on top of the mountain, that he is WWF, he is the champion. This is who he is. With Austin, it's about gaining everything he lost since that neck injury, since he's been run over. And he says, I need to beat you, Rock. I need it more than you could ever imagine. Now, you sitting there as the fan at this time and just how these two came across. Who do you think won this exchange in your opinion?
I think even as a Rock, I think Austin wins this exchange, but not by much. I think both of them do an amazing job for an interview segment to build a feud, to continue this build is amazing. I don't think WWE has the balls to do this again. Something like this. I don't think I've ever seen it since then, where you have two people in an interview room talking.
In current day WWE, we have the split screen where they're not in the same room because it's like, oh, we don't know what's going to happen right now. But now it's kind of like they did this later in 2003 with Kane and Shane, where they're just at a restaurant and it's like a scene from a mob movie, and they're just talking about how they're gonna decimate each other. It's not as quite dramatic as it's now because it's still in the wrestling setting where Jr. is interviewing. It's a 10-minute segment with The Rock and Austin going back and forth, describing why this match and why the WWE Championship is the most important thing in the world to them. And there's no script. Steve Austin and Jim Ross said they didn't have any script of what they were going to say. Rock was going to say some things. Steve Austin was going to say some things in character and just kind of bounce off and just kind of go from there. Now, I find that amazing that they carried a compelling 10-minute interview segment, and both of them here were at the top of their game.
You only let that happen when you trust two people, or even three people, because you got to trust Jim Ross too. When you trust three people inherently to do something, and these three guys delivered, because you can't discount what Jim Ross does. As much as Jim Ross is the neutral party here, as neutral as he can be, because he was a Stone Cold Homer forever. Everyone always knows he was. He does a great job letting these two guys just build. What do you think of The Rock personally? What do you think of Stone Cold personally? Like, it's just the perfect questions, the perfect responses. And it does so much more for this feud. And the thing about when we brought up, was Deborah necessary? No, she wasn't, because right here in this interview, Stone Cold says, "Forget about Deborah. It's over. It's done." Basically, she doesn't matter anymore. Now we're on to the final stages of what this is.
I do agree with like that's some aspect, but Deborah was that kind of match, that match
Yeah.
to start the flame, that gasoline trail to what we are going to have at WrestleMania. Where was she completely necessary? Not necessarily, but I think it was a way for both Stone Cold and The Rock to finally interact with each other and finally get physical with each other.
Well, yeah, again, because they're both baby faces, so you have to give them a reason to interact.
And like you said, the whole personally, I don't care for Steve Austin. Personally, I don't care for The Rock. And just how they're interacting with it. Even Stone Cold admits during that sit down that The Rock brings the best out in him and he brings out the best in The Rock. And at WrestleMania 17, they're going to create magic. And you could tell by Steve Austin's demeanor, but he was fantastic in this promo segment, and he's just both of them are just staring each other down. But Steve Austin, you could hear the the venom in this. There's no comedy, which I was surprised because these are probably the two most not comedic wrestlers, but they're the ones that added a level of humor into their feuds and rivalries. Even when they did their first rivalry, there was a lot of haha with the throwing the Intercontinental Championship off the bridge. Here it was just, I'm the best at this. And not even Stone Cold or The Rock, depending on who's talking, is going to interfere with that. And at WrestleMania, I'm going to prove that I belong on the top of the mountain. Just an overall great segment as a whole.
There are rivalries in wrestling. Two guys who are perfect for each other. They're the yin to the yang. Rock and Austin. H and Michaels. Samoa Joe, AJ Styles.
Edge Cena.
Edge, Cena. I'll even give Cena Orton. There are guys who are like the perfect like connection with each other, and you don't have it as often as I think wrestling needs it at times. And at this point, this was that moment.
Like you said, there's a very select number of people who could find that quote unquote dance partner, that chemistry that they have. And Rock and Austin were probably one of the best ones, not only during this era, but of all time.
You have a lot of great people who have great matches with great people. Like Angle has great matches with everybody, but you don't have that other guy. That guy that when you know there's a reason they did this 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a
And tell
reason.
three completely different stories too. And all of them
Yeah.
being even different, but just as good as the next. But as we're getting down there, there's actually more to the SmackDown. I didn't even realize. I thought it was just going to be the segment, but we have the Rock's in the handicap match, and the reason for that interview as a whole was Jr. was asking, "Well, Rock, do you want Steve Austin as a tag partner?" And the Rock's like, "No, I don't need a partner." So it's the Rock versus Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit, and Vince McMahon gets involved. There's a rock bottom to Vince McMahon, but Kurt Angle attacks, and Kurt Angle is just on the ankle lock, and Deborah's pleading. The referees are pleading with Angle to get off the Rock, and you see Steve Austin backstage. You see him backstage, and then you see him get up. He's gonna come save the Rock, and then it cuts back to the ring where the Rock's screaming in agony, he's screaming in pain, and then it cuts back to backstage, and Steve Austin just gets a beer, sits down, and he just watches the destruction.
Because now we've built to this point, and it's very interesting. Because now, like early on, when Austin was like, "Oh, be healthy," but now it's like both of them are building to a point where they know no matter they want whatever advantage they can get at the match now, because the match is going to happen.
Now, before you could argue like in week 1 or 2 of the build, it was more professional. But ever since the inclusion of Deborah, now since there have been stunners and rock bottoms exchanged, now it's become personal.
Yes.
Now we're in the final week of the build, and this is a crazy week because you started the show saying you were a WCW fan. Well, this is the show where it's the last WCW Nitro.
Yes, it is.
This is the last one. Now, you primarily starting as a WCW fan, how did that affect your wrestling fandom, if at all?
It was crazy, honestly, because I remember so vividly at this point going back and forth, going like, "Oh, I'll watch 10 minutes of Nitro, and then I'll flip to WWE and watch 10 minutes of Raw, and we'll just go back and forth." And I remember Shane walking out on Nitro, and how crazy, because at that point, I was 10, 11 maybe, watching Shane walk out because I wasn't paying attention to the news, and then seeing Shane McMahon walk out and go, "The contract reads McMahon, but it doesn't read Vince McMahon. It reads Shane McMahon." I remember bugging out. I lost my shit.
Now, when Shane says, "I just bought WCW," did you think at that time they were starting their own promotion? Because there were plans to do a WCW reboot even like before Vince bought it, and then they were planning on doing another WCW reboot with the WWE branding. Did you think like Shane buying WCW was the biggest story at that time for you?
Oh, it was the biggest story, because then I remember going to the lunchroom the next day and talking to my friends at the time, and going, "Yo, can you just imagine what could happen? Goldberg could show up at like SmackDown, or like Sting could be there." Like you did your mind just went wild with the possibility.
So we get to the main event, and the main event could be could have been a legit pay-per-view main event because you have The Rock and Steve Austin against the Brothers of Destruction. Now, if you were to categorize, again, 4 stars or 4 or 5 stars, these would be the guys who would define that Attitude Era. So it's very apropos that they finish the final Nitro versus Raw with this
Oh,
match.
it is. But even before this match, you have the Rock's looking for Stone Cold, and he finds Stone Cold in his dressing room and goes, "We're partners tonight." And that's it. Like, I don't want to be your partner, but we're partners tonight at least. And Austin goes, "Well, after the match, all bets are off." And he's
Mhm.
like, "Okay, fine. We're good. Let's go."
Yeah, but mutual understanding.
These 4 guys getting into the ring, and like, you have Taker and Austin going at it. It's great. Rock and Kane are going on the outside. Rock again selling great for Kane, throws him into the table, and Rock's like, "Oh God, my stomach, God."
Yeah, Kanan, very underrated big man too.
What made Kane so great, and throughout his time as a wrestler, he's a lot more agile than I think anybody gives him credit for.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, Kane always had the clothesline off the top rope. Like, Taker had the old school, but like Kane he just moved quicker.
This match ends with Triple H interfering because he's facing Undertaker at WrestleMania. Clocks Taker in the back with a steel chair. Austin goes over, pins Taker, and as Austin's celebrating, he asks for some beer. Rock is just staring Austin down. Austin's busy opening his beers, and you could see like a beer on the ground that Austin already drank. You see the Rock's foot gently just brush that beer to the side. The Rock spins Austin around, kicks him in the gut, and delivers his own finishing move. He hits Stone Cold with the stunner.
It's just adding a little bit to the personal. It's a personal thing to hit like Stone Cold with the Stone Cold Stunner. And I feel like this was the first real time people were doing that. Like, this was the start of like, oh, I can do your finishing move on you, and it's like a cool thing. Like, you weren't seeing Hulk Hogan jump off the top rope hitting an elbow drop like Savage.
I don't even think that would be physically possible
That
in
would be scary, man.
2001.
That would be a scary thing, watching Hogan fly off the top rope.
That's something I need to see. Not now though, because
No.
his back is destroyed.
Also, God, it's just I don't even know if he could get to the top rope if he wanted
Just
to.
the image is all I need.
Someone out there can do that somewhere.
No one was doing each other's finishers really that much. Well, you had Kane and Taker, but they're brothers. It's in the family. You could do the choke slam, you could do the tombstone, you could do anything.
Yeah.
But this is a more personal. These are 2 guys going at it and trying to one up the head game with each other, whether intentional or not. And this is the final stamp on that road to WrestleMania. The Rock hitting Austin with the stunner, giving him a taste of his own medicine.
Austin was ahead early. Rock came back and tied him, basically. It evens it out.
Which is a good parallel for their careers, too. Austin was always in front, but The Rock is just as strong and just came back from behind again.
Exactly. And then it leads to this final little showdown.
Yes, it does. And it is the final face off. So Austin comes out, calls out The Rock. Vince comes out. He's saying, "I'm not letting anybody ruin my WrestleMania." And The Rock comes back out, or he comes out. And Austin's like, "So you like beer, huh? We're going to do a little toast for you. So here's to your health. Here's to your happiness. And here's for me winning the WWF title at WrestleMania." And then he smacks Rock's beer can. And then The Rock responds in kind. He's like, "Here's to your health. Here's to your happiness. And here's to The Rock winning at WrestleMania 17." And then clunks the beer again to Austin. Then they're just throwing punches at this point. They're just going for broke. And Vince is like, "No, no." And then he's calling the referees down. He's calling all the superstars down. You have Billy Gunn. You have Crash Holly. Just
Yeah,
separating them.
what's Crash gonna do?
He's gonna do a lot. He's the Houdini of hardcore. He could do a lot. He can make them both disappear. But everyone's splitting up, and they're splitting them up in like separate dressing rooms. It was like a hockey fight out
Oh
there, just
yeah.
all of them. But I have to say, whenever Rock's in these brawls, I feel like his arms don't move at all. It's like one of those Sock'em like robots, but it's like it never fully extends. It just kind of like gets stuck into place.
Yeah, it does a little bit, but eh, again, this was meant to be a quick like we're gonna get these guys separated as quick as
It was
possible.
the final tease before the match at WrestleMania 17, and this show ends with the famous video package, "My Way" by Limp Bizkit. Now, as far as highlight packages go, or as far as promo packages go, what exactly makes this one the upper echelon? Because this has been for when I think of like highlight packages and what I see online or just among fans on what's the best highlight package, this is always in the top 3, usually at the number 1 spot. What makes this highlight package that special?
A lot of people who do those rankings, it is part of your childhood, part of what made you love wrestling in the first place. Like you connected to that memory. But it is great because you have these two guys who are again the top of the industry, and the song like you'll see things my way. This is going to be my time. I'm going to be champion, and it's just the energy, the build, the stop in the middle, just like where you get the just one more fight and I'll be history. Like just a little slowdown adds to the build because then you get them looking at each other and it's just everything about it. WWE when they used to do these packages were great at it, and I miss these packages so much.
You go back to that line, "Just one more fight and I'll be history," and that has like a double meaning because whoever wins is going to be solidified into history as the top guy, and the one who loses, they will be history and never forgotten again. Obviously, that's not true with either of these superstars, but the feeling is like this is all on the line. This is what the entire Attitude Era wrestling has been building to, was this fight right here, and we're gonna get it.
Yeah, honestly, there's only one. The only other like as much as there were so many great packages, the only other one that I remember as vividly as this one is I want to say it's like the first Hell in the Cell where they're talking all the biblical quotes and stuff, and whoever they like paid to do like the Hellfire voice was like great at what he was doing. But it's just so perfect, and it put all these moments together in such a way that you were just you were already pumped, and it just drove you over the edge waiting for this match.
Well, then, let's get to the match, shall we?
Yes, let's.
Now, this is WrestleMania 17, Rock Austin 2, and it goes for 28 minutes, a little over 28 minutes. And before the match, a very interesting thing happens. Howard Finkel announces this match now has no disqualifications. The announcers, who are Jim Ross and Paul Heyman, are scratching their heads saying, why is it no disqualification? Now, as a fan, you watching back, were you just like, oh yeah, no disqualification? Or did that kind of like raise some eyebrows or question marks in your head saying, what's going on here?
At the time, because I was still decently young, my thought process was because this has gotten so personal, you were just like, oh, you want these guys to prove it, and then you want nothing to stop them except the other guy. And the Rock, in the interview back then, the Rock said, "All my sweat, all my blood, it's gonna take everything you have to stop me, just like I know it's gonna take everything I have to stop you." So this is like that, like we are going to go at it no matter what.
Yeah, they just go right out of the gate. They're just brawling. They're going through the crowd. They're getting busted open. The Rock goes through a table by accident when he's laying on it. And then Both of them are busted open. They're bleeding. And they're throwing everything but the kitchen sink at them. Rock bottoms, people's elbows, stunners, the $1 million dream.
That was great. Seeing that was another thing that I think WWE stopped doing after a while. They stopped highlighting like past things wrestlers did for a long time because it was like, oh, we don't want to admit like, oh, this guy changed his gimmick. Like we don't want to admit that happened.
Yeah, like retconning it.
Yeah. Like we don't want to admit like hypothetically like, oh, Seth Rollins used to be a clown or something. We don't want to admit that. That never happened.
Yeah, with Steve Austin as the ringmaster being brought in by the $1 million man is a nice little callback to. It's a nice little reward to fans who saw him rise through those ranks, and he's actually going to the well, so to speak, to try to get the job done. And then The Rock does the Roddy Piper Bret Hart finish, where it's like he just climbs the turnbuckles, tries to roll over for the pin, but Austin kicks out.
These guys want to pull out all the stops. They know each other so well that they have to pull out stuff they haven't done in ages to try and get this win. And that's what this shows here. And it's a great little it's a great little thing to show like they will do whatever it takes. If Austin has to hit the $1 million dream, which he hasn't hit in years, he's gonna do it.
And then during the match, you have Vince McMahon walk out, and he's doing that power strut. And then The Rock has Austin in a pinning predicament, and Vince McMahon pulls The Rock off of Austin. Rock obviously is not happy with Vince, chases Vince around the ring. Vince goes in, Rock comes into the ring after, and Austin hits The Rock with the rock bottom. Gets a 2 count.
This was one of those things because you didn't know when Vince first comes out. Actually, the first thing you think is, oh, The Rock's gonna turn heel. Because you're like, it's Vince and Stone Cold. They can't be on the same side. They just can't. And then when he pulls the Rock, you're like, wait, what? Like, what are we doing here? And even until Austin calls for the chair, you're like, wait a minute.
Austin calls for the chair. Vince gets him the chair. Austin starts beating The Rock with the chair. He's doing the chair shots. He's doing the stabbing chair shots. You have Austin holding The Rock up with Vince hitting him with the chair, and he's just hitting him multiple times. At least it was almost 20 times. It was so many chair shots.
I think this is the only thing about this match that upsets me a little bit. Even though back then chair shots were a lot more, oh, he got hit with a chair, he's actually down. Hell, we just saw it last week when H hits Taker with a chair and Austin rolls him up and wins the match with one chair shot. Now it takes like 40 to hit somebody and they win the match. Just because it's just the stabbing motions and then a couple hits on the shoulder, I almost wanted one more shot to the head by Austin. Like one more like diving shot just to be like, okay, that's the final blow. You know what I mean?
At this point, The Rock has kicked out of the stunner, kicked out of the rock bottom, kicked out of a chair shot, and now Austin is desperate. He is just going to town with these chair shots, and it almost seems like a little not anticlimactic, but it's just like, oh, that's what took The Rock out.
Yeah, like there should have been just like one more really good chair shot. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
This one more. Vince picks him up and Austin just charges at him and gives the one more big leap, and that's it. You know,
one more Mortal Kombat fatality blow. That's what you're looking for.
But so, you know, it's nitpicking. It really is, because chair shots again back in the Attitude Era were a little more damaging,
right?
So it's forgivable. But nowadays, because you have a mindset where we've seen again people take 40 chair shots and walk away.
Right. Austin wins the WWE title.
He does.
He's celebrating with it. He's celebrating with the championship. And he holds out his hand to Vince McMahon, his mortal enemy since 1997.
Yep.
and they shake hands. And a new era is born with the Steve Austin Vince McMahon partnership in Texas, Stone Cold's home state.
And everybody loses it.
And now you as a fan at this time and watching Steve Austin turn heel, turn into a bad guy, the equivalent of Batman shaking the Joker's hand and them running roughshod over Gotham, which would be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it doesn't really happen that way in WWE. Now, what was, as a kid, what was your reaction to this mind blowing moment?
Shock. Shock. Because, again, as you said, these guys have been feuding for what, 4 years now, basically? For like, this doesn't happen. You almost. It's like a nightmare. You don't expect Austin to turn heel and side with Vincent K. McMahon. Like, it doesn't happen like that. But in the same breath, when you look back at it and you have Austin going, I will do anything to be the WWF champion again. I will do whatever it takes. And when you have two guys who, as we've said throughout this video, are on the same level with each other, you take that little advantage of signing your soul over to the devil to make sure you win.
Off air, we talked. I asked you your top 10 favorite matches, and this one cracked the top 10.
Oh yeah.
What makes this match to you a top 10 match?
The build is great, honestly. Again, except for a couple little nitpicks, the build is an amazing build. Both of them sell it amazingly. Both of them beat the living hell out of each other. You buy everything that's happening. You have two of the biggest wrestlers of all time. If you were building a Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, just period, these two guys would be in heavy consideration on that Mount Rushmore. You haven't had a time where you had your two top baby faces fight and give it their all, and then you have something, the most unthinkable thing happen. Like, you can't even think, I can't even think of, actually, no, there's only one other time where you have something as crazy as Austin shaking hands with McMahon, and that's when Hogan joins the NWO. Like, those are the only two moments that you could ever have this.
There's very few times where the audience is actually stunned or shocked. They were going crazy here for WrestleMania 17 because they treated Austin like the hometown hero, which is pretty much what it was. They were in Texas. But rewatching the build to this, is there anything different that you would put in the pro category or the con category when it comes to this rivalry? Like you said, those little nitpicks?
Again, the couple of little cons are, I would have liked them to mention Austin earlier on, going, I will do anything to win this title. Again, it's probably, again, a new mindset also about one more chair shot to end The Rock's night on WrestleMania. But besides that, I think the build is done pretty well. Does it get a little miniature tedious in week 2? Yeah, but you know what? That's forgivable, because then week 3 we course correct and we're going.
Just watching this for the first time, just the TV shows, because I watched the Rock and Austin prior. Watching the build back, it was really cool to watch just kind of how everything unfolded, because you have Kurt Angle almost playing a supporting role throughout the whole rivalry to prevent Rock and Austin from getting at each other early. And then, of course, like you said, the promos, Austin's promo wise of just intensity saying, I need to get that WWE championship. I need to beat The Rock because he's been off for so long. It's almost like he's trying to convince himself that he still has it. And he's a desperate man. And what do desperate men do? They do desperate things. And he did that by quote unquote selling his soul to the devil, being Vince McMahon. And that started the gears turning for the Stone Cold heel run as the top bad guy of the promotion for a time.
You would have liked to have another babyface to kind of counteract that, but you didn't have it at the time. And that's probably why that heel turn ended up souring because, again, as we've hinted, The Rock would slowly go to Hollywood at this point. And you didn't really have that guy to take his place.
Do you think this was the swan song of the Attitude Era? Do you think this is where the Attitude Era laid to rest and just kind of evaporate and transition to a different era? Because after this, The Rock and Austin are just kind of slowly taking a back seat to the newer generation. And now, with Rock going to Hollywood and Austin ending his career in a couple years' time, this would be their strong this would be the strong conclusion to the Attitude Era that a lot of people point to, because this is the last pay-per-view where wrestling is of that mainstream popularity.
This is probably the thing about the Attitude Era and these eras we like to try and put boxes in. No era ends on top. So this is like the last moment. This is the last big like epic moment. But everything after this is still the Attitude Era, and it goes out with a whimper. Like that's the thing. You never end on top. You always end eventually on the bottom, and that's when you have to start over with the new era. So yes, this is the last big glorious moment. But this isn't technically the end of the Attitude Era. The couple months following this is the end of the Attitude Era.
Final question. We've made it to the final portion. Now, a lot of us wrestling fans are familiar with the star system. I'm gonna give out a couple categories. You tell me how many stars you would give it, like if you were to do a movie, like on movie podcast shows like Shoot the Flick, which is available on Wednesdays on your
Oh
podcast
yeah, no.
providers. Now, for the match quality, the promos, and the build, I want you to try to give a ranking out of 5 stars for each of those things.
The match quality, it's 5 out of 5. Like again, you have two of the biggest baby faces of all time beating the living hell out of each other and both doing whatever it takes to win. And then you have the twist at the end, which at the time blew my little brain out of my head. Basically, it was so shocking. And then the build is still great. It really is. Again, maybe it started maybe a half a week too late, the hitting of each other, but even still, that's a real big nitpick on my part. So I'd probably again say 5 out of 5, maybe 4.75 if I really want to be a nitpicky jerk off. But it's probably closer to a 5 out of 5. And what was the last one you said? Build, match, promos.
Yeah.
5 out of 5, easy. Two of the best talkers in all of history.
Yep, and you would give Austin and Rock 5 out of 5s as well.
Easy.
Yep.
Easy.
All right, man. This has been Wrestling Retold and Relived with Richie Mars. Thank you to Scott Eisenberg for joining me. Tell us where we could follow you, Scott.
You can follow me and my lovely wife on Twitter and Instagram at Shoot the Flick. Richie said we are on pretty much any podcast platform. We talk about movies. We usually are. What we do is we pick a movie each week, and introduce each other to it. So recently we did Jingle All the Way. My wife introduced me to Jingle All the Way. And now I'm introducing to her to Batman and Robin. She also has thrown out the challenge to Richie to pick a wrestling movie, and she says she's down for that. So
Does she want a good one or a bad one? Because I feel
she
like
says she's down for anything. She said she's down
I
for whatever.
I listened to the episode and I will take her up on that challenge. It's just remember she asked for it.
I know she did, and she's gonna regret it. But yes, we are on Spotify, iTunes, all that good stuff. The episodes come out Wednesday. Uh, give us a listen.
Awesome. Thank you very much for joining me, Scott. And this has been Wrestling Retold and Relived with Richie Mars. Thank you, and we'll see you again next time. Same podcast time, same podcast channel. Outro music, outro music, outro music.